Hello, I am Sarah Flint, the Creation Care Fellow from St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Fernandina Beach, Florida. This is the second of four videos about how to have a greener holiday season so we can help to reduce our carbon footprint on God's beautiful creation during a time when we do not do a very good job, typically. If you saw the first video of this series about entertaining, you may recall that I mentioned that household waste increases more than 25% during the weeks between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. It's the American way to generate a lot of trash all year long, but we do really go off the charts during this season. In this video, I'm going to talk about specifically about decorating and our traditions around that. And I thought it would be a fun fact to start with that in the United States, seasonal lights account for an estimated 4.5 billion kilowatt hours of electricity consumed. That's more than the national annual usage of many countries, including Laos and Nepal. You can see on this chart our holiday light usage and what we do. Um, if you are able to use LED lights, and I think primarily that's what you can buy these days, you can hardly even find incandescent lights anymore, but the LEDs really save a tremendous amount of electricity. So as you're replacing old strings, make sure you're looking for LED lights. And in fact, if you may even want to just replace these older strings of lights anyway to save on electricity consumption. I'm usually not a big fan of throwing something away that might still have use, but this is a situation where it really might be worth it to conserve less energy. Unfortunately, used lights always have to go to the landfill. They cannot be recycled or repurposed in any way that I know of. But I've read figures that LEDs use between 75% and 95% less energy than incandescent lights. So it is really a very significant difference that we just can't ignore. And while I'm on the subject of lights, it's a really good idea too to put your Christmas lights on timers so that when you don't need them to be on during the daytime, for example, they won't be wasting electricity. It's also good if you can plug them into power strips and just shut it off completely when you're not using them because you are still draining a small amount of electricity, even if the lights aren't on, as long as they're plugged in. So it's good to just make sure you're not using power at all. Moving on to another subject, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again for this one. I'll just take a moment here. Um, Christmas card exchanging is a very beloved tradition in our culture, but it's really amazing to think about how many cards do you get sent every year. In fact, in our country alone, 2.65 billion cards are sold every year, and that could fill a football field 10 stories high. So we're talking about a lot of cards that we send out every year. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now and talk a little bit more about things we can do to avoid this waste. You can consider sending an e-card. And in fact, if you want to include photographs with your yearly correspondence with people, it's actually easier electronically to include your pictures if you just do an email to everybody on your list. But if you do really prefer the look and feel of physical cards, for the love of God, please avoid glitter. Glitter and glossy plastic finishes or metallic finishes on the cards make them completely unable to be recycled. So if you just stick with the plain paper cards, that's a much more sustainable option. And at the end of the season, when you are getting rid of cards that you have received, you can always craft with them. You can keep the picture part of your card and make a postcard out of it for next year or make gift tags out of them. And on the part that's signed, you can always throw that in your compost bin so that it's not going, well, you can recycle it or you can compost it rather than sending it to the landfill. And I have another screen share for you here on the subject of decorating. There is nothing that sparks a livelier debate than the great tree debate. My research says that a once living tree is indeed the best way to go over an artificial tree. And while there's energy involved in harvesting and transporting trees, a real tree usually travels about 200 miles to its final destination, where the fake trees often come to the United States from China, and they'll often travel more than 8,000 miles to get here. So just transportation alone has a tremendous carbon footprint. Um, and real trees actually sequester an awful lot of carbon. They sequester zero point 0.2 to 1.2 tons of carbon dioxide per acre per year while they are growing. So that's really a wonderful thing. It makes them a really good renewable resource. And as is the case with using paper, it's a monoculture, which isn't ideal, but it does preserve land when you have forests of trees that are used for Christmas trees or for paper production. It does help a little bit with stemming some of the unsustainable development that we see in so many parts of this country, especially here in a place like Nassau County, where it's really pretty out of control. Um, I'm going to go ahead and pause on this for a second here and talk a little bit more about trees. Artificial trees often contain PVC, which is a really nasty, toxic carcinogen. They're always plastic and metal, and producing plastic and metal is always an energy intensive operation. If you do plan to use an artificial tree, if you have a reason why you really need to do that, please plan to use it for at least 10 years so you really get a lot of good use out of it before it goes to the landfill. One of the saddest things about an artificial tree is always it's going to eventually end up in a landfill. If you are able to donate your tree when you're done using the artificial tree, if it still has life left in it, make sure to send it along to a thrift store or put it up on one of those Facebook marketplace groups or a buy nothing group so that hopefully somebody else can get use out of it when you are finished with it. Coming back to real trees, a really great option is if you can buy your tree with the ball of tree roots, maybe in a pot, so that after you're done with it inside of your house, you can go ahead and plant it outside. And if you keep it in a pot, you might be able to use it even for a second or maybe even a third year. But if it's too big, you can take it outside and plant it. Um, One thing that's pretty cool in Fernandina Beach is when you do go to discard real trees, you can put them out on the curb certain times of the year. Usually the information comes out from the city about when they will collect our trees, and then they turn them into mulch, which is a really good sustainable thing to do with your old tree. If you have woods on your property, you can even just drag the tree into the woods and leave it there. It's great, as it decomposes, animals, thrive on that, especially our insect life. One cool thing that many of you may not have thought of in this area is that the Caddyshack Ranch, which is on the north side of Jacksonville, will take tree donations. They're big cats, they're big rescue cats. They're really kind of a cool place. They really enjoy playing with Christmas trees. So you can actually donate your tree for use at the rescue Caddyshack. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing again and talk about ornaments. You can do a lot of hand making of ornaments and garland too. And that's a really fun thing to do, especially if you have kids or grandkids in your life. Pinterest is full of all kinds of ideas for every skill level and every amount of time, for minimal materials, for special materials. I've done things like repurposing can lids, using Cricut cutouts, painting salt dough, doing macrame. There are tons of options out there. You can also use cranberry or popcorn or flowers or greenery to make nice garland. One thing I'd ask you please to avoid using plastic tinsel on your tree. It is not biodegradable. You can't really completely remove it from your tree, and it does become harmful. It's a hazard for wildlife as well if it ends up out there at curbside and birds start taking it for nests and things like that. It's not a good thing. And along those same lines, if you're wrapping gifts, I'll talk more about gifting in another video, but please avoid using plastic ribbon on gift packages or on your decorations because again, it's not biodegradable, it's not recyclable. There's really nothing you can do with plastic ribbon when you're done using it. You can buy some pretty good decorations sometimes at your local thrift store or at garage sales. If you do decide to buy new decorations, try to keep justice at the forefront and make sure your items are fair trade and sustainably produced and produced with fair treatment of their workers. 10,000 Villages and Serve International are a couple of organizations with a really good reputation um, for being good fair trade companies. And there are lots of others out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about sourcing when I talk about gifting, but these are just a couple of organizations that are good ones. But really, a lot of us already have a lot of decorations, and there's not a need to buy new things every year. I know we like to go to those sales the day after Christmas, but really just try to avoid doing that because most of us have enough of everything we need. Let's see, where am I? Okay, I talked about gifting. I talked about ribbon a little bit, but another important thing to be aware of is with wrapping paper. It's very similar to Christmas cards, where if it's relatively plain paper, you can recycle it no problem. In Nassau County, you can even recycle tissue paper. But if your paper has glitter or any other plastic on it or metallic coating, it's not going to be recyclable. So please be aware of trying to be as sustainable as you can be with those items. At the end of the season, you will be putting your items away, and I urge you to really put them away carefully so that they have a good long life. And if you decide to purge some of your older decorations, again, just go ahead and send them to a thrift store or put them on Facebook Marketplace or something along those lines. So those are my tips for decorating and card exchanging, and I'm sure I've forgotten some things. And I know we can't all do everything, but if we can all do a little bit, it's helpful. It really does make a difference. So do what you can do and pass along these tips to others. Have conversations about creation care. It's a really wonderful way to love God and love your neighbors. Peace be with you.